Cuphead is finally here. After the long development cycle since being teased in an Xbox indie game splash reel, we finally have it. So how does it hold up? Was the extra delay worth the wait? Well, for the most part, yeah. This game is pretty good. Cuphead is a boss rush game, similar to Fury, which came out last year. You spend a majority of your time in this game, wait for it, fighting bosses. There's not much more to it than that. I mean, technically there is a little bit more to it, but we'll get to that later. So, as for the gameplay, how is it? Well, it's pretty basic. The game consists of nothing more than running and shooting. There's a parry system as well, but it's really nothing more than a fluff mechanic outside of 2 fights where it's almost mandatory to use. The real meat of the gameplay comes from the boss fights. As a player, interacting with these fights is what you're going to be doing 99% of the time. Thankfully, these interactions are almost overwhelmingly enjoyable. Every fight offers a unique moveset, and not a single boss in this entire game feels like a retread of a previous encounter. The bosses themselves all have unique looks and personas that help round out the overall battle just that little extra bit. And on top of all of this, the fights have a steady increase in difficulty as the game goes on, progressively getting more and more difficult as you delve further and further into the game. All of these aspects are what make Cuphead's boss rush style gameplay work. Every fight feels fresh and engaging due to the fact that all of the bosses feel unique in every aspect. The beginning of every fight is a moment that is equal parts giddiness and equal parts dread. However, the fights aren't all perfect. In some fights, the game will just force you to take a hit at times. Due to the overwhelming number of projectiles that can be on the screen at once, there will often be moments where dodging simply isn't going to happen, and you'll be forced to take a hit. There's also the element of randomness that presents itself in a couple of fights near the end, more specifically with fights that rely on random platforms. If you get a bad platform spawn, you are going to take damage unless you have the forethought of Magnus Carlsen himself. Since you only have 3 HP to work with, this can lead to some incredibly frustrating moments during a fight. Nothing is more upsetting than doing extremely well on a fight and losing a hit point to getting unlucky. But these are both relatively minor issues. The boss fights as a whole are more than enjoyable, even with these minor flaws. Now, I'd be a damn fool to not mention how gorgeous this game is. Normally, art doesn't have that much of an impact on how much I enjoy a game unless it is executed to an almost insane degree. Some examples being games like Hotline Miami or Persona 5. Cuphead, without a shadow of a doubt, reaches these levels and soars past, as it legitimately makes a strong argument for being one of the most beautifully animated games of all time. Every single frame was hand-drawn. Every single split-second movement from a boss was drawn out by a team of artists and imported into the game. Cuphead is the living definition of a passion project, because no other force could have motivated someone to go through such an incredible amount of painstakingly difficult work. This game is goddamn gorgeous. Cuphead sets the bar for artistic expression in video games. It's just an immaculately beautiful game. It should also be noted how tight this game controls. Not once did I feel as if I was fighting the controls in this game, or that some amount of input lag led to my demise. Cuphead controls perfectly, and you can easily tell that a lot of time was spent on absolutely nailing the character movement. So, Cuphead sounds like it's pretty damn good. Well, that's because it is. It is a very, very good game. However, Cuphead, like all other games, has a couple of flaws. The biggest sour point of this game for me were the run and gun levels. Initially, Cuphead was designed to be a pure boss rush game. No platforming levels whatsoever, just bosses. This rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and inspired the developers to shoehorn in a bunch of platforming levels to appease the masses. And let me tell you, these levels completely feel as if they were slapped together last minute. To make an enjoyably difficult platforming level, you need to spend months upon months fine-tuning every single jump, every single enemy spawn, and every single platform placement. Cuphead is a difficult game, and it has to maintain its level of difficulty even throughout these platforming sections. So, the developers got it in their heads to make these levels jam-packed with enemies constantly assailing you at every given moment to maintain that epically difficult Cuphead style. Except, this doesn't make the levels fun. Does it make them hard? Absolutely. Fun? Not so much. The platforming sections as a whole were clearly afterthoughts, as the real time and effort was spent on the bosses, and boy howdy does it show. Honestly though, that's about it. That's all I can really muster up when it comes to this game's flaws. Cuphead is an astoundingly consistent and enjoyable game from beginning to end. It was an absolute breath of fresh air, playing a game that wasn't afraid to let the player face legitimate challenges. Not to mention this game's immaculate art style and impeccable controls. Overall, Cuphead is a 5 out of 5. The overall level of consistency on display here is something that is honestly impressive. Across the board, Cuphead is an exceptionally enjoyable game. The minor flaws this game has are almost completely forgettable, as every sour experience you have will be immediately washed away in a shining sea of quality.